All right, looks like the YouTube stream is working, so we are good to go there. All right, looks like the YouTube stream is working. All right, looks like the YouTube stream is working. Okay, all echoes of myself have been destroyed. Aaron, what's up, man?
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah, we can hang a minute, let people join in. I'm glad normally I just throw the YouTube up kind of at the last minute. It's nice to have it set up. So hopefully that'll be better for other people who don't want to get on Zoom yet another time. Drinking a beer here in honor of Molasses Books. Looks like they're opening back up in the evening, so their hours were pretty limited at the bookstore for a long time. But nice to see a little bit of normalcy, though. Who knows how that will last.
Well, Todd, I'm going to join you here on the microphone. Just hop in and say thank you to everybody for attending who's in so far. I'll offer a few kind of introductory remarks as people trickle in. So it's hard to believe, but this marks our 6th anniversary of doing this series. So we've done at least 4 events a year since 2015, summer 2015. Traditionally, or originally, I should say, the readings are hosted at Molasses Books, which is a bookstore bar in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Todd and I met at the Breadloaf Translators Conference, which I think we both highly recommend as a place for people interested in literary translation. And the general ethos or idea behind the series is to give people who are writers as well as translators a place to share both sides of their work and be a writer and a translator in the same place, instead of having it be an afterthought. So tonight we have 4 readers who we would love to introduce you to, and we'll be going for an hour till 6 p.m., 10 to 15 minutes for each reader, and we'll introduce them each as we go. So we're hoping that in the future we'll be able to get back in person for our in-person events, but we're really thankful for the breadth and kind of the openness and access that these online events have given us over the past year. So, Todd, any comments from you before we get started?
No, just another thank you to everyone coming out. I know it's summer and hard to stay indoors and listen to a reading. So we're very, very grateful, and I know these readers are going to have some excellent work from all over the globe. So, thanks for being here.
Cool. Well, I guess without further ado, I'll introduce our first reader. And before I do, I'll say that we have met so many of our readers through other readers. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you think you'd be good for the series, or if you know someone who would be, because we value the community that these events have been able to foster. So thanks for that connection. So we'll start off by introducing Julia. Julia M. Walton is a scholar, creative writer, and aspiring Japanese to English translator from the Philadelphia suburbs. She recently graduated from Princeton University, where she majored in English, earned minors in creative writing, humanistic studies, and East Asian studies, and served as editor-in-chief of Princeton's historic literary magazine, the Nassau Literary Review. Her creative work has previously appeared in Counterclock, Figments, NAS Lit, and the Best Teen Writing of 2016. Julia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. And I'm extremely flattered that you invited me to read at your series. Today, I'll be reading a translation in progress of mine, and then afterward, I have a little bit of my own creative work. The translation comes from the Japanese literary magazine Blue Stocking, which ran from 1911 to 1916, and served as an important intellectual center and kind of inflection point for modern Japanese feminism. I became interested in the magazine as a result of my senior thesis research. I just graduated from Princeton, and I wrote an academic thesis on recently translated works written by several Japanese women authors. One of them, Mieko Kawakami's Breasts and Eggs, which Sam translated. And in the course of that research, I was doing some thinking about feminism, and I was getting into the history of feminism in Japan. I had actually come across Blue Stocking a little bit before Sam recommended it to me as something to look at, which kind of solidified my interest in it. But in my thesis, one of the points that I stressed was that, contrary to a normative view, and as much as there is this thing called Western feminism that's, often been imposed, feminism has in many ways always been an international project. In the 20th century, feminist thinkers from various nations, in fact, collaborated and talked to each other across borders, in particular through a process of translation. And we can see that in Blue Stocking, where we not only see fiction, poetry, essays, experimental works, but also translations of an international array of feminist political thinkers. So for me, despite some interest in Blue Stocking in the Western academic arena, I wanted to bring more attention to those women and the groundbreaking work that they did in order to sort of continue that international dialogue. So this selection is kind of my first shot at that. It's from a sequence of poems which appeared in the first issue of Blue Stocking under the title Rambling by the poet Akiko Yosano. She was one of the most noted post-classical women poets of Japan, and was both loved and hated for her frank and positive depiction of women's sexuality and her exploration of women's emotional lives. So the first poem in the sequence is known by the title The Day the Mountains Move, and it serves as both kind of a prophecy and a call to action. And the poems that follow continue on the topic of female agency, emotional experience, and deviant social behavior. So here is Rambling. The day the mountains move has come. I say so, but people don't believe me. The mountains slept, but only for a time, since long ago, the mountains once moved and blazed with fire. If some doubt that, it's just as well. Oh, humanity, yet believe this. All the women who were sleeping will now awake and move. I want to write in the first person. I am a woman. I want to write in the first person about me. Whether on my forehead or my shoulder, my hair unravels. I weep incessantly. The feeling strikes in hot torrents. My sigh, breathed deep, is mad with grief like fire. Men are unaware of such things. They praise me and will likely slander me in time. I cherish a thin new glass bowl. When water too fills it, it flows with tears. When I throw flowers too in it, it burns with fire. Lament if it is utterly broken by the careless hands of men. After all, unlike unglazed earthenware, it is sentimental, delicate. The razor, cool and white too. I wonder, is the blade pleasant? Crickets chirped in the hot, pungent grass, though in the local inn, harmonica sang languidly. When I grope inside my greasy comb box, a razor wrapped in sandalwood paper emerges. The taste of bitter wood, foreign wood, or tobacco. I want to call the taste of tobacco sweet. If I do, those thoughtless people will compare it to the taste of sugar. These days, though I am learning to smoke, I haven't been keeping it from others. It's all right if they whisper that I behave like a man. Still, I am afraid because those fools outnumber me. So that was as much of the sequence as is presentable so far, but I hope to keep going. So there'll be more to come. So I also have a selection from a story of mine, maybe also on the extremely broad topic of the interior lives of women, broadly defined. This is from a story that appeared in the Lit Mag Counterclock this past January, but I wrote it last spring. It's called The Nature of Things. It can probably be classified in the genre of COVID fiction that we're all tired of by now, but it's not really about COVID. It's more about dealing with the parameters of human life within the time we're given and the need we have to protect people we love versus, the often violent forces of nature. So the story focuses on a young mother whose name is Agnes, who's married to a man who worked for the Yellowstone Wolf Project, which is a real initiative that aimed to reintroduce wolves to the park in order to balance the ecosystem. And the story begins when Robert passes away from a viral infection in the early days of a pandemic, leaving Agnes with their toddler son, whose name is Elliot. So this is a passage a little ways into the story. Agnes reached out and cupped Elliot's face. He didn't look like Robert or herself or anyone else she knew. He just looked like a baby. She tried to picture the chromosomes that had doubled and crossed, migrated and parted, the processes of meiosis, division, and differentiation that had made him across months inside her. But no emotion stirred in her chest at the sight of him. She didn't know if she wished he would look like Robert or if she wished he wouldn't. If he were a wolf, he'd be an adult within 3 years, Robert had teased. He was lying on his side in bed with his hand under her shirt on her stomach. How creepy, she said. Imagine that if that's how fast he grew. Or if he were fully grown, but still acted like a baby. Robert was laughing. Yeah, I think the wolves can keep their 3 years, Robert said. I'd like more time than that. He rolled over on his back. The light from the bedside lamp reflected in his eyes. They say that humans grow up so slowly because our brains consume so much energy relative to our other organs. Is that why? Agnes asked. She imagined the years ahead, long sleepless nights, tantrums, potty training, grade school bullies, puberty, some long and awkward conversation, partly about sex, but mostly about love. Energy sounded like a strange way to put it. She felt that the real reason humans grow up so slowly is that they have so much to learn. Well, it's a theory, Robert had said. But what did she know, Agnes thought. When a sperm cell meets an egg cell, that's life. When a hand warms the small of a back gently in the corner of a university library, and oxytocin excites a neurotransmitter in the brain, that's love. When the lungs, inflamed and bruised, fill with fluid, and the heart, overcome, stops beating, and the neurotransmitters in the brain, stripped of oxygen, can no longer make the ATP necessary to perform work. When the cells that contain his dreams and memories become inert and begin to decompose, that's death. That's what Robert would say. She'd have to scatter his ashes in Yellowstone. On the phone, before anyone really believed the numbers, and before he stopped being able to speak, they had only ever talked about how good it would be when he came home. But that's what he would want, Agnes knew. He would like to be a tree, but it wouldn't work to plant one. He had told her about that once, how that messes with their root system, and if allowed too much light too soon or planted too far from other trees, shortens their lifespan. It depended on the species, he had said, but nature knows what's best for it far better than we ever could. A tree has to land on the earth as a seed, sprout, wait, outcompete, and grow of its own accord. It has to be connected at the roots to its mother, who, recognizing the chemical signature of her genetic kin, feeds it sugar and phosphorus, just as a human mother feeds her milk to a child. The tree, while still a sapling, may very well be grazed by elk and smothered. In that case, it dies, returns to the earth, and ceases to be a tree. He wouldn't mind being that tree, he had said. It was the nature of things. After she put Elliot to bed, she took a blanket and wrapped it around herself on the couch. She couldn't sleep in her own bed anymore, the bed that also used to be Robert's. The branches outside, shaking in the wind, left moonlit shadows on the wall. So that's all from me, but thank you very much.
Well, there would be a lot of clapping if we were in person right now. So thank you so much, Julia. Yeah, it's really fun thinking about the kind of connections between those things. So thanks for sharing a selection from yours, and also the work in progress. I did drop a link for those who want to check it out later, just to what Blue Stocking Magazine is. Just a Wikipedia link, but that's some information for anyone interested. So our next reader is Larissa Kaiser, who has her own reading series. So we'll give her a chance to mention that too. It's called Jill with an exclamation point. But to introduce Larissa, she's a writer and Icelandic literary translator. And her translation of Kristen Eriksdottir's A Fist or a Heart was awarded the American Scandinavian Foundation's 2019 Translation Prize. The same year, she was one of Princeton University's translators in residence. In 2020, Larissa co-founded F and Thorn, a chapbook press dedicated to Icelandic poetry and short fiction in translation. She is co-chair of PEN America's Translation Committee and runs the virtual Women Plus in Translation reading series, Jill. Thanks for coming, Larissa.
Thank you for having me. Thanks both to you, Sam, and Todd for inviting me. It's great to be here, and it's an honor to read with the rest of my fellow translator writers. I'm actually just going to be reading translations today, but they're really good, so I think it's a good mix. I'm going to start with a poem from Jökulkvörf, which is a collection. It means glacier line. It's a collection by Kári Tulinius, who is a poet and author that I've been translating for like 8 years, and I love his work. And since it's summer, I thought we'd start with a glacier poem. Get us a little cool down. So Snæfellsjökull Glacier is it's on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula in Western Iceland, and it's the glacier that inspired Journey to the Center of the Earth. And it's visible from Reykjavik on clear days, which is not often, but it's quite a distance. But on clear days, you can see it from Reykjavik. But scientists are now saying that if climate change continues apace, that it will basically disappear in 30 years. So I find these very poignant. So yes, the first poem is Upon Seeing Snæfellsjökull Glacier from an idling bus. A damp scrap of paper sticks to the sky. I peel Snæfellsjökull from the window pane and scribble down what I should have said to you. 1. Under a mirror-smooth surface, there is rock that is rock. 2. Snow melts, becomes a mountain that is a mountain. Snæfellsjökull will be tossed in a garbage can, disintegrate among banana peels, paper cups, soda cans, candy wrappers, garbage that is garbage. 3. Poetry documents a landscape, feelings rot. So that's the first poem. And again, that was by Kári Tulinius. The next 3 that I have are actually from the first chapbook that my co-founder and fellow Icelandic translator Meg Madic and I are going to put out with our new sporadically publishing chapbook press. And they're all by members of the Imposter Poets Collective, which is a collective of women poets in Reykjavik. And one of my favorite things about translating these poems is that they're all so very different. So the first is by Þóra Hjörleifsdóttir. And Thora, it bears mentioning, just had her first book come out in English, which is very exciting. Also translated by Meg Match. It's called Magma. So if you'd like, you should check that out. But yes, so this is called Malice. I went around your house, naked from the waist down, but for curry yellow wool socks. I rubbed myself against the sofa, walls, your kitchen utensils, gripped doorknobs with my butt cheeks. As I understand it, there are more bacteria on doorknobs than toilet seats. This is now most certainly the case in your house. I stuck your pillow between my thighs so that when you're trying to rest, a pungent bog whiff assaults your senses. Your toothbrush I used to brush the hair in my salty armpits. I blew my nose in some of your towels, but definitely not all. I want you to question your perceptions. I want you to feel me hard on your heels. So, I have a fan going and all my pages are flying everywhere. The second is by Þórdís Helgadóttir, who is a poet and playwright and short story author. And this one is called Hauntings. The child in me haunts me, a light, a light. We live in Pompeii. The atmosphere here isn't good at all. It's the volcanic ash that does it. It makes history. It makes us famous. Brings us on the Late Show and the Late Night Show and the Night Show and the Daily Show. Brings us the situation. Brings us the gum and the cigarettes and the work and the pop culture. Then the development aid, the opportunities, and no one sees opportunities like us. It makes our character Nordic Latino. Which is why there are no ruins here, no petrified bodies here, just attendant spirits, just conference attendees. I hear that there are opportunities up north. I hear the pack ice cracking. I try to snare the specters. I try to fix the carbon, mineralize the gases. I try to transform them into metaphors. Then maybe the magma will go quiet just as the skeletons begin to sing. Ghosts haunt my bones, my throat. I've been trying to be an animal, but stopped short of tonguing myself clean, of idling, soaked skin deep on the bank, stopped short of choking on plastic and washing ashore. If you hear me scream, it's the child in me, my inner child, who finally commands a big enough voice for everything that is and has ever gone wrong. She doesn't ask for much, just what the little mermaid wants, the little prince and an eternal soul. Okay. And then the last of the Imposter Poets poems that I'm going to read tonight is by Sunniva Smársdóttir, who is also a poet and a writer and actually an educator in the library. Many hats, I suppose. And this one's called Jam. This is nothing new, of course. Women have always gathered in houses by the sea at harvest time. We work ourselves warm, a bead of sweat between my breast, milk purling on one nipple. The sugar we buy in turns, shuttle it in wheeled suitcases we bought in street markets and airports, pink belts buckled around their middles so we'd recognize them. Tattered Louis Vuitton logos remind us of our trip to Turkey a year or so ago when we first tasted pistachio paste. The pot was a communal investment, containing as many liters as run through our veins. The jam simmers. Maybe someone cries. Sugar syrup sweating in a pan, thickening in our veins. We set out crackers, a jar of olives. Maybe after we'll get in the hot pot. Skim the sugar crusted atop the jam. We never throw it away, but carry it outside in a red bowl and let it seep slowly into the soil that is coming into being just like us. And then my last reading, I'm going to go back to Cowdy's glacier poems. We've got one more. And it's called Vanishing of Snæfellsjökull Glacier. And like I said, you can see this glacier across the ocean, essentially, but not very often. And so Cowdy used to carry a notebook in which he wrote down poetic descriptions of the glacier whenever he could see it. And so over a period of 500 days, he saw it about 40 times. And this poem was composed from those descriptions. Oh, and I was going to read a little bit. I'm going to read like one tiny little bit in Icelandic just for fun. Februar. Gráman bak við landslagið blæs burt í vindi. Ástkona tekur ljósmynd af umföðmu landslagi. Vindur lyftur kjóldvaldi, grípur sljórið með sér og ber, I always mispronounce that. Grípur slórið með sér og ber í átt að skellu á himninum. Sérðu haf? Já. Sérðu fjöll? Já. Sérðu jökulinn hverfa? Já. Já. Alltaf já. So, all right. Vanishings of Snæfellsjökull Glacier. March. A shipless sail at sea billows in gusty wind that batters the sky and smothers the green sea. Love sinks, love crumbles. No, love vanishes in clouds and crumbles. April. Two triangles, one atop or within the other, off-center by an inch or two, two peaks, a line drawn between them, slightly dips in the middle. Only in disorder do forms resolve. The sea is a line that divides love from time. May. One spider nears another, shimmies along unknown threads towards the center of a web. A lover awaits stock still on the horizon. Mating fades into gray-blue sea and sky divided by a circle that only exists within the eye. June. An arched-back centipede crawls along a leaf, led by fumbling feelers, devours all life, trailing ice and lava and void and love, filled with centipedes waiting to hatch and devour the world out to the far edge of what the eye can see. July. A lover parades out of a slumbering room like uprooted kelp, bobbing far from dry shores and lifeless cliffs that crumble into surf, before time dislodges the pupil that sees nothing but the void of the white of its eye. August. The eyes, ears, nose, mouth of an animal, sleeping, feeding with eyes half closed, its mouth opens and everything rips apart and reality is colorless against a blue background perched on the horizon, like a snow bunting that blanches when love arrives disguised as nothing but eyes, ears, nose, mouth. September. An octopus with arms outstretched floats in blue glass. Whether the creature is a reflection is neither certain nor uncertain, but the octopus is unconcerned and bends its body backwards, casting shadows on pale arms as they lovingly embrace the glass. October. A flipper rips a window into the sky as it bursts through the surface of the sea and vanishes. The Cupid's bow of the glacier flattens to a smile. A tongue licks the clouds. November. Cupid's bow is aimed slightly above Reykjavik, one arrow to strike a whole city. The ring of mountains' teeth in a laughing mouth, 1,000 tongues and 100 times, 1,000 tongues in one city that all meet at 2 points. December. Glowing curvature where the small of the back becomes rump. A slope in the mind. Cupid slides fast, fast down the mountainside that vanishes into sky, a shadow on the horizon that grows bigger and dissolves, a stain on the sky polished clean. January. Hem of white dress, white veil, a crown the cautious declaration of a beloved in a landscape photo that slots into the field of vision, behind, inside, in front of, on the side of what the eye can see from Reykjavik, silhouettes and messages in only one direction. February. The gray behind the landscape blows away in the wind. A beloved takes photographs of an embraced landscape. The wind lifts the hem, snatches the veil, and carries it towards the stain on the sky. See a sea? Yes. See mountains? Yes. See the glacier vanish? Yes. Yes. Always yes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larissa. That was really what you promised beautiful work and you delivered beautiful work. And, nice to hear multiple languages and really a multitude of perspectives. I think that was, if you needed proof that one translator could occupy several different voices, that was certainly it. So thank you.
Larissa, could I interrupt you, Todd, and just ask Larissa, could you say when, because the next Jill reading is coming up, would you mind, I dropped the links in, but would you mind?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for being better at
No problem.
Promoting my series than I am. So Jill it is now a virtual series, and we're basically my co-organizer Elizabeth Redfield and I are posting videos on our YouTube channel every 2 weeks, and the series spotlights women or non-binary translators or translators of women and or non-binary authors or both. So particularly given that Women in Translation Month is coming up next month, we welcome your submissions. It's totally up to you what you want to read. It could be something in progress. We welcome work from people who are at any stage of their careers. So yes, definitely look at the link that Sam posted and send us your work. Thank you.
Count on Sam for all promotion needs. He's very diligent. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn about that series. And let's charge forward here. Our third reader is Lily Meyer. She is a writer, critic, and translator from Washington, D.C. And her translations of Claudia Ulloa Donoso's story collections, Little Bird and Ice for Martians, I hope we hear some from Ice for Martians, are forthcoming in 2021. Congratulations and welcome, Lily.
I regret to tell you that I will not be reading from Ice for Martians because it isn't done yet. But the title story is online, so you can cheat and find it if you want. So I thought, first of all, Todd and Sam, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. I thought that I would start with a little bit of my own work and then go to Claudia's because she is just so much funnier than me. And I think it's good to end funny. So I'd like to start by reading just a tiny bit from the novel I've been writing for many years. It is about a family of American Jews trying to work out their identity through the lens of American interventionism in Chile, which I'm sure I don't have to tell you all was significant and bad in the early 70s. So the past, and my writing of this novel has been very intertwined with my translation life, largely because it's led me to do huge amounts of reading in Spanish, which, eventually made me want to translate some of the things I was reading. Claudia's work is unrelated, but that is how I began to translate. So the section I'm going to read is a bit in which a 16-year-old American kid named Gabriel, who has grown up largely in Chile, joins this is before the coup when Allende is president, and Gabriel joins a communist farming volunteer brigade with his girlfriend, Caro, who is Chilean. And as he's in the fields doing this volunteer work, begins finally to realize the extent of his own privilege. So I thought I would just read you a little bit of him being a dumbass to start. A good communist would like trabajo voluntario. Gabriel learned within an hour, that he did not. Stooping hurt his back. The field's dust bothered his throat. Hacking squeaky-leaved cabbages from their fibrous stems hurt the bones in his hands, and his dull knife, which he was probably using incorrectly, was giving him blisters. The sky was oppressively gray. The air smelled like dried cow shit, though there were no animals in sight. Trees hulked in the distance, bearing avocados and chirimoyas that Gabriel was sure would be more fun to pick than cabbages. He should never have expected to enjoy himself. It should have been apparent to him that joining a labor brigade would involve an unpleasant quantity of physical challenge. He'd imagined long political conversations in the field, maybe some Victor Jara type singing, but the cabbage farmers worked in silence, and so Gabriel and Caro followed suit. Stalks and leaves rustled around them. A condor orbited overhead. Gabriel would have liked to trade places with it. Right now, he'd trade places with any living being that got to direct its attention away from the clumped ochre dirt. Unfortunately, Caro loved the work. She beamed all day. She offered to do extra hoeing. On the drive home, she glowed like she had the night they met. Gabriel told himself it was an after effect of the brief slice of time they spent having sex behind a brush pile, but he knew he was lying to himself. He knew the truth. Caro liked labor. He hated it. He was bad. Caro was good. That night, Gabriel was too tired to sleep. The next night, he slept like the dead. Wednesday night, he awoke, shaking, from a dream in which fighter jets strafed a cabbage field while he picked frantically, unable to put his knife down and run. A megaphone voice boomed from one of the jets, but, awake, he couldn't bring back its words. He hugged his knees to his chest, wet blue light seeping in through the blinds. It was his first coup nightmare. He would later have whole strings of them. He would dream about bombs and guns, ruined city blocks, his dog starving and bleeding, his friends caged and hurt. He would grow used to waking up screaming, desperate both to banish his dreams and return to them. The fighter jets had come to seem like child's play, but that night he was terrified. He'd never before had a nightmare that felt possible. I should have mentioned this takes place 2 months before the coup. Normally, his bad dreams were about Hitler or showing up at school without pants. The nightmare kept Gabriel awake till dawn and made him jittery as he slogged through turnip fields the next day. The old bus never brought them to the same farm twice. Thus far, they'd picked cabbages, grapefruit, pears, and turnips. Picking grapefruit, Gabriel decided, had been best, though the distinctions between the various crops were minuscule. His blisters, on the other hand, were huge. He'd thought farming would be romantic, pleasantly exhausting, like hiking or sex. He'd thought it would deepen his relationship to the earth, or increase his appreciation of the Chilean landscape, or bring him insight into the condition of rural laborers. Thus far, it had brought him a nightmare, a sore back, and palms that looked like he'd taken a cheese grater to them. On the pear farm, he sweated so much his hair got soaked through, then froze solid during lunch. The only improvement after a week was that he understood why Cara loved it. To her, trabajo voluntario was a return. Her grandparents bred sheepdogs in the same bowl of land to which the camper van brought them each morning. She'd lean on the window, pointing out familiar landmarks. She'd climbed this hill, bought dessert at this road stand, swum in this murky green pond. At each farm, she examined the dogs, bony, matted mutts for the most part, to see if she'd known them as puppies. Gabriel loved dogs, but he did not want to approach these ones. He had no desire to stroke the cart horses' noses or feed carrots to the mules. Exploring the farms had held no appeal for him. He envied Cara's comfort, her ties to the land, but he couldn't share them. He was a city boy, a spoiled one too. Gabriel kept his feelings to himself. He pretended not to be sick of dirt, of vegetable rows, of mud-crusted hand forks, and the pervasive smells of fertilizer and damp earth. The farms all had the same peeling stables and filthy sheds to store tools in, the same dusty huts for eating lunch, and, in Gabriel and Caro's case, sneaking off for mid-afternoon sex, at which, at least, he was fairly sure he was improving. It helped duration-wise that he was constantly afraid of getting caught, though he had been lucky thus far. Gabriel wanted to take his sexual impunity as a good omen, but he recognized that more likely it was a testament to the work ethic the farmers had in abundance, and he had to admit that he lacked. All right, so that's my spoiled boy. And now I think I will switch to Claudia Ulloa Donoso, who is a Peruvian writer who lives now in Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, bless you, Todd, where she's lived for many years. I stumbled across her work totally by accident, became completely obsessed, begged her to let me translate her. And nicely she said yes instead of being creeped out. And I thought I'd read a very short story of hers that I have always really loved about a writer who, upon encountering success, finds that he is not well suited to it. The story is called A Writer's Pastimes. I've decided to stop writing. My books are in every bookstore in the country, but I live alone and I drink too much. I eat out of cans and I smoke more than ever. Some people might find this bohemian. They might think it helps me pick up women or sell books, but the truth is I'm a sad son of a bitch. All I want is to go back to my old ways. I want to do the things I did before I started to write. Collect screws, for example. In my collection, I have more than 300 screws of different materials, including plastic. The screws are grouped and classified by the date and location where I found them. I don't just buy them at hardware stores. No, these screws are special, like people. That's how I feel about them. Alone in the street, the screws are like runaways. They've escaped from a life stuck in place, one of many, supporting someone else's weight. Maybe they'll rust outside, but better to rust to death than sit motionless in an old man's replacement hip or clack around in an old woman's dentures, listening to her gripe about the pigeons that nest on her balcony. I have that type of screw, you know. I find them near hospitals. They're one of my most important groups. I got my favorite screw at a burial. The lid of the coffin hadn't been securely attached, and as the coffin descended into the grave, it fell open to reveal the dead man's face. The cemetery workers didn't stop shoveling. The mourners didn't stop watching. No one spoke. We stood there in black, not moving, not crying, as the dry earth fell on the dead man's face. It looked like cocoa on top of a cake at first, but before long they had covered him completely. I was sure the escaped screw was waiting for me somewhere, and when I looked, there it was, a silver screw with the funeral home's initials, which incidentally are the same as mine. I walked for more than 4 hours and didn't find a single screw. At home, the consequences of my literary success are there to greet me. The cat is sleeping on the warm top of the television I never turn off. Something smells rotten. A light on the answering machine blinks red. 2 messages. The first is a woman sighing, which effectively conveys irritation without speech, a message from her. The second is me saying, buy cat food and dandruff shampoo. I used to hate hearing my own voice. Now it happens every day. I got a letter from her today too. She was angry when she wrote it. I can tell because she pressed down so hard with the pen that I can almost read her words like Braille. She says I have to stop writing to her, but I've never written her a letter. What I do, and have done for a while, is send her clippings of my reviews and interviews, articles I've written, signed book covers, and so on. No special dedication, of course. I send her everything that has my name or picture on it. This way, it will be hard for her to forget me. I wonder what bothers her so much about getting mail from me. Maybe it's the smell of tobacco, which seeps into whatever I touch. It's probably invaded her house. I bet it leaves a fog that hurts her eyes when she tries to sew, sends her housekeeper into fits, makes her fat husband sweat and turn red. She must have to look at him for a long time to prove that she's concerned, and then kiss his slick bald spot, even though what she feels deep down is disgust and loneliness, which I know, because those are the emotions her letter evokes in the reader. Or maybe her signature annoys her. My signature annoys her. It's chaotic, illegible. Maybe it reminds her of me. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because now that I'm not going to be a writer anymore, I'll have to stop bothering her, because pretty soon I'm going to run out of clippings to send. I light a cigarette and her image disappears with the first mouthful of warm, bitter smoke, a white snake that slides down my throat in order to nest in my lungs. The cat trains his green eyes on me. He's angry because the scrape of my lighter, which always takes a few tries to work, woke him up. He stretches until his hair bristles with static and he looks like a stuffed animal. Then he licks his paws and goes back to his dreams, where I'm sure he's an enormous cat hunting elephants. I'll cut the story off there. It moves into some theft and terrible behavior. And it's in Little Bird, which comes out in a couple weeks. But thank you so much.
I just have to say, Lily, I think you're as funny as Claudia, just for the record. Those were both very funny.
Thank you. It's so weird not being able to hear if you guys are laughing. It's very disorienting, but thank you, Sam.
I mean, it's interesting though, like there's definitely differences in the sense of humor, but really fun to hear from both of those. Thank you so much. I think there were a lot of laughs out there in Radioland. So,
anything else you want to say about the collection coming out? Is it later this year? When?
So Little Bird is out in a couple of weeks with Deep Vellum, and Ice for Martians, which is just an iconic title. I'm sure we can all agree. Will be out probably with a new Latin American literature only press at Columbia Sundial House. They're launching in November. They're very cool. They're doing all bilingual editions of everything they publish.
Wow.
The Gabriela Mistral collection. It's going to be dope. I'm very excited about it. So stay tuned for more about that.
Great news, and great to hear about that press. It's not often you see the prose in a bilingual edition. That sounds great. All right, so here we are. We have one more reader left for you. We're so glad she was able to participate. Naima Rashid. She's an author, poet, and literary translator. Her first book, put out by Oxford University Press, was Defiance of the Rose. And it was a translation of verses from the Pakistani poet Perveen Shakir. And she has a few works forthcoming, including a translation of a novel by the author I think she'll be reading from today, Ali Akbar Natik, and her own fiction and poetry. And I thank you all for sharing original work, translation work, in whatever form you feel. That's kind of what we're here for, and you're welcome to read from any side of that. So we are happy to have her here. She is in the UK-based translation collective Shadow Heroes, which maybe she can tell us about. And welcome, Naima.
Thank you so much, Todd and Sam, for having me over. I apologize for the quality of my voice. I'm fresh off a 10-day-long spell of cold. So this is really the best I could do. The choice I had was between not showing up and showing up with this voice. So I'll be reading an excerpt from the novel that you just mentioned, Todd. It's a novel called, it's an Urdu novel called Nolaki Koti, which translates literally as the 9 lakh mansion, or the mansion that cost 9 lakh rupees to build. It's written by Alia Karnatик, and I'm translating it for Penguin Random House. It's forthcoming in 2022. Fingers crossed. It's a single excerpt, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It takes you straight to the heart of a small village in pre-partition Punjab. The timeline of the novel is from the 1930s to the 1980s. So from 1930 to 1947, it covers the period before partition, before the partition of India and Pakistan. And I've chosen a day in the life of a secondary character called Maulvi Karamat. He is the local imam or the local Maulvi in a village, which would be the Muslim version of a priest. So I'll just get straight into it. When Maulvi Karamat left home, he could barely walk straight. Every few minutes, he would lean his full weight on his staff, and he had developed a stinging headache. In addition, he had developed a slight fever because of being on an empty stomach for long. At intervals, he felt a renewed bout of anger against Fazldeen, who had still not returned with the rotis. Since the past 30 years, Maulvi Karamat was the head imam of the small mosque. More than a village, it was a small cluster of around 50 to 100 houses. Maulvi Karamat's great-grandfather, Khudayar, had come here first, seeking alms from people who lived here. At that time, this mosque was an empty and unmarked spot. He was the first to mark the precincts as his own by throwing his patched quilt of rags on the floor here and starting a prayer. At first, the villagers would give him 2 square meals out of pity. Then slowly, some more people, seeing the earlier ones, began to join him there for prayers. Khudayar had spent a year attending religious lectures in an institution. As a result of that experience, he had memorized some verses of the Quran and also knew how to pray. On the basis of this knowledge, he started performing his duties as imam and declared himself the Maulvi of the village. Little by little, the functions of the mosque began to shape up around this. After his death, Maulvi Karamat's father, Ahmad Deen, succeeded him. Since that day, from generation to generation, they had remained here. The entire population of the village was in fact descended from a single ancestor and had split into different families over time. They were all simple and illiterate folk. They did not have inherited land worth more than 2 or 4 acres. The entire population comprised of poor people who could barely make ends meet, let alone afford to pay Maulvi Karamat a salary. As a result, while his pockets were often empty, he was often paid in kind. On Eid, the hides of sacrificed animals, the clothes of the deceased in the village, beddings and charpais, a token fee for saying the nikah at weddings, and every year a portion of harvested wheat at harvest time. Maulvi Karamat would sell this wheat in the city and get some money in return. Besides this, every morning and every evening, Karamat's son Fazldeen, who was around 14 years old now, would collect rotis from the whole village. Every house had taken it upon himself to give at least 1 roti to Fazldeen every day. This way, every day, Maulvi Karamat would collect 30 or 40 rotis. Obviously, they couldn't eat all of those, for there were only 3 people in the house, Maulvi Karamat, his wife Sharifa, and his son Fazldeen. So the rest of the rotis were left to dry in the sun. After a month, he would gather these in a large sack and then sell them at a shop in the city. This would give him enough cash to live by for a month. Collecting rotis from the village people was Fazldeen's duty. Maulvi Karamat would instruct him to go to as many houses as possible so he could collect a large amount. Still, 100 houses was no modest count. He was barely able to do 40 or 50 houses in one round. On top of this, there was an added problem for Fazldeen. Every time he would go to collect rotis, people would start allocating small chores and errands to him to run around the house. One moment would ask him to leave the sack of rotis at a house and send him off to market to get some things. Another would tell him to feed fodder to the cows. As a result, he would reach home very late. When he did reach home, Maulvi Karamat would be furious and asked him why he had returned so late. Sometimes he would give him a few whacks in anger. So from both sides, the ire landed on poor Fazldeen, but this was a ritual now. Fazldeen did not find this harsh. In fact, because of his daily visits to the homes, he also got to taste an exquisite range and variety of meals from all houses, which few were lucky to have access to. The second advantage of these daily rounds was that Fazldeen's intimate knowledge about the village was richer than anyone else's. He would be fully in the know about everything that happened in the village from minute to minute. Subconsciously, he was aware of these happenings inside the houses. Whenever anyone wanted to ask something about anyone else in the village, they would call upon Fazldeen. Who was visiting whom? Who had accused whom of what? He had an intimate knowledge of trivia like this. Maulvi Karamat was also benefiting directly from Fazldeen's sharpening knowledge. He would know when was a good time to get some garlic from Ahmed Baksh's house, when there was an excess of basmati rice in Sher Muhammad's house, and when he was also in a good enough mood to give some and would oblige if asked. All these matters aside, with the exception of his father, Fazldeen was more educated than any other man in the village. At this young age, he had learned the many verses and surahs of the Quran and words of spells and chants. The reason why Fazldeen was able to gain so much knowledge was that no one else in the village had bothered to send their children to Maulvi Karamat to study, nor did the Maulvi wish to encourage any such heresy. As a result, his entire wealth of knowledge and learning was only being transferred in a single direction, towards Fazldeen. Slaughtering a hen, praying in a newborn's ear at the time of birth, these acts were a breeze for him. Bathing a corpse, digging a grave, preparing a funeral shroud, and the rituals of a funeral, none of these were new to him any longer. Whatever Maulvi Karamat had learned from his father Ahmaddin, and even that which he didn't fully know, the jumbled up, half-formed knowledge, he was transferring it all to Fazldeen, for the survival of their family rested with him. After a lot of hardship, when Maulvi Karamat returned home after the Zuhr prayer, Fazldeen had returned after his rounds with the rotis. The Maulvi's anger was at its peak by then. He quickly grabbed a staff and brought it down upon Fazldeen. When Fazldeen saw him raise the staff, he leapt forward and broke into a run to dodge the blow. "You rascal, where were you off to? You've been gone since 6 in the morning, and you return only now at Zuhr time? May God wreck you, a devil like you hasn't walked the earth yet." Maulvi Karamat was running, trembling with anger. "Did it even occur to you that there was nothing to eat back home? You return only when I'm about to die of hunger." Seeing his father's fury, Fazldeen shrank up against a wall, shaking with fear. He was still thinking of what to answer when the staff landed on his buttocks with a whack. When Sharifa saw her son taking a beating, she quickly hauled herself between the staff and Fazldeen for protection. Grabbing the staff from her husband's hand, she said, "You cursed old man. Why are you hell-bent on killing the poor boy? All day he spends doing your infernal rounds in the heat, and you're still not content. I know that if it wasn't for this boy, you would starve to death." Sharifa reached out for the petrified Fazldeen and put her arm around him protectively. He was rigorously rubbing his buttocks with his hands for relief as they were still smarting after the blows. "Yeah, right. I would have starved without him. When you hadn't given birth to him, did I survive on mud then? For a full 50 years, I've collected rotis from this village, and if people give them willingly to him now, it's because of me. Had it not been for me, both your mother and son would be scavenging for scraps to eat in a garbage heap." Muttering angrily to himself, Maulvi Karamat sat on the charcoal. When she saw the Maulvi settle peacefully at last, she turned towards Fazldeen and, scolding him, asked, "Why do you take so long? I do not approve of these ways of yours at all. Your useless ways will make beggars of us before long." "Amma, people start asking me to do chores," Fazldeen said with a frown. "What can I possibly do? If I refuse, they simply take off my sack of rotis and do not let me go. That leaves me with no choice." Patting his head sympathetically, she asked, "So tell me, who does this to you?" "Amma, Malik Nizam's wife keeps me doing chores for a full hour. This delay is largely because of her. She collects chores for around the house and waits for me to come by to perform them. As soon as I reach, she sets me off working. That's where I spend most of the time." "Are you listening, Karamat? The labor for the whole village and your thrashing to boot all falls on the poor boy's neck. Do not dare to say anything to him again." Sharifa's temper was rising steadily. "Tell Nizam clearly to let his wife know we cannot do this labor for him. The amount of work he does for her for free, if he did that against wages, he would earn a full 2 rupees per day." Maulvi Karamat shrank like a wet cat to one side of the bed. Embarrassed, he stared into space and said, "Let it go, Sharifa. I will talk to Malik Nizam, but try to understand that he's the village elder and everyone respects him. You have to assess the situation carefully. We take hundreds of things from his house. Anyway, forget these matters and give me some food quickly. My head is spinning." Then looking towards Fazldeen, he said curtly, "Get up, Fazlu. Tell me, how many tenses are there in Surat Yasin? Sit here by my side and tell me. If you cannot state those correctly today, watch how I skin you today. It's been 3 full months and you're still stuck at number 14. I covered all of them in 2 months only." After receiving his dose of scolding from Maulvi Karamat, Fazldeen arose, took some water for ablution in a pot, and performed his ablutions. After that, he went to the room and took out a big Quran, a special edition with notes and commentary, wrapped in a silken case, sat on the broken stool in front of Maulvi Karamat, and turned to Surat Yasin. Shortly afterwards, Sharifa placed the food before Maulvi Karamat. While eating his meal, Maulvi Karamat kept asking Fazldeen about the tenses and scolding him. In between, he kept sharing other knowledge with him as well. Whenever Fazaldeen made a mistake, he would whack him lightly on the arm or leg with his staff.
Well, Naima, thank you so much for sharing that translation. I keep thinking about just the idea of the roti being dried and how that can kind of accumulate into this almost like a currency. I don't know, just
Exactly.
I can't really place what it was about that, but that connected to so many things in my head. Just the question of time and how that changes things.
Exactly.
So it's very, very relevant to me.
Thank you. I'm glad it resonated.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes, and I wanted to maybe give the other readers a chance if anyone had a question or idea, or not an idea, like a comment or a reflection to share. Anyone, or Todd, if anyone had anything else they wanted to say in our time here.
I just want to read that novel now. That's kind of where I stand.
I just
Does give
realized,
me
Todd,
some-
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, just this has given me so many great books to check out soon. So thank you guys for promoting your work. Go ahead, I cut you off.
Yeah, Todd, you asked me to say something about Shadow Heroes, and I forgot. It's a collective. It's a UK-based collective, and they conduct translation workshops in schools, high schools, and schools and colleges. And I'm a part of that. So they conceive these workshops, and then they do them in rotation. They conduct them in rotation throughout the years. And it's been an absolute delight being a part of that community. And literally, when you're in a classroom and you're conducting a translation workshop, and you're with this group of kids from 15 different countries, speaking some 40 languages between them, and they've never heard Urdu, or they've never. I mean, it's a completely foreign language. And by the end of the workshop, they are translating a poem. It's like explodes my mind. Seriously, it's beautiful. So yeah.
That's wonderful. It's just heartening to hear of a translation workshop, especially on the high school level. I feel like it just doesn't exist. I grew up in Central Florida. I didn't even know translation existed. I just thought the books were already in English.
I know, and that's why it's important to catch them, before the damage is done, while they're still at school. So,
yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the wonderful readings. It was just a pleasure to listen to them.
Yeah, and if Todd and Sam, if you could just, I don't know, link to all. I haven't been taking notes, sorry, from the chat, so I would really love to follow up on all the books from which the excerpts were read, if that's not too much to ask for.
I second the ask. This has been just such a pleasure to listen to. It's really been fun.
I tried to drop things in the chat as we were going. So if you look in the chat on the right,
Do that.
link to the blue stocking.
I'll quickly take some notes.
Yeah, we'll keep it open for a second. We'll give people a chance. You could even open them in your browser, and then you would be able to, like if you open them in a new browser kind of thing. We have the Jill series, Larissa's series here. Larissa, did you have a link to share for your chapbook? Maybe you can drop that in there.
Yes, thank you. I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And then let's see, Lily. I don't know if you had. I guess I dropped in the Little Bird link. Do you know if there's a link available for the Columbia bilingual edition that you mentioned, or?
There isn't yet. No. Hopefully in a month or so.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, obviously we're all curious. It is really a joy, though. I think sometimes when we have things that are so kind of at that stage that they don't even exist on the internet, it's a real pleasure to have that kind of content here in the series as well. And let's see, Naima, did you have links? Did you have a link to the
to what exactly? I'm gonna have a link to this excerpt, which is published in Asymptote.
Okay, yeah. I think
if you just Google Asymptote and Ali Akbar Natik or Asymptote and Naima Rashid, it'll come up. So
okay.
yeah.
I think we can get that.
It's funny that these readings, they seem like, it's just 1 hour and everyone has like just 10 minutes each, but they open up so many conversations and so many possibilities, and they build slowly and steadily over time.
That's really well put. Yeah.
It's funny, we never really did questions/reflections when we had live readings. And now I think it's an element I'd like to bring into our live readings, but that I would never have thought to do unless we had done these, which is, I think a lot of readings do have that moment. But for some reason, the Us&Them readings, I think everyone was too drunk by that time.
Yeah, being in a bar, I mean, I feel like one of the biggest challenges of doing it at Molasses was just like, how long is the bathroom break going to be? It's a real science. You'd read the crowd like, I think this crowd, it's a 4-minute bathroom break. Like if we give them 5 minutes, they're gone. You kind of have to like regulate it. And then other crowds, it was like, I think they need 10 minutes. There's just a lot of bathroom breaks needed here. So anyway, Zoom is obviously a very different world. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap things up. It's really a pleasure to have all 4 of you. We hope that we can host you in person at Molasses, and everyone tuning in. Thank you so much for watching, whether you're on YouTube or on Zoom, this platform, wherever you may be. And I hope folks check out Larissa's series as well. It's been really cool over the past 6 years of doing this series, seeing other translation series popping up. First, when we were starting out, there didn't really seem to be much happening, and there's several translation reading series in New York alone. And then when you get at a national or international level, I mean, I'm sure there's still some we haven't heard of, So we hope we can keep doing this. It's been a good 6 years, Todd. Zoom hug. Really appreciate your collaboration on this, and readers and attendees, you can always get in touch with us via our website, usandthemreading.com. There's a contact form there. And yeah, that'll do it for today. Thank you so much to all 4 of you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
all.
for having me.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.